Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to another video right here in the Creative Color mini-series on Free Will Photos. Today, what we're going to be looking at is hue, saturation, and brightness in relationship to what is color and how that works. So stay tuned. Let's go. All right. So here we are inside of All One Photo Raw, and what we're going to do is take a look at the hue, saturation, and brightness in order for us to get a good appreciation of what each of these sliders do inside of All One Photo Raw, or really just in any photo editing software. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the painting adjustment. And all I did was I went to local adjustment. I added in a paint with color, and then I just colored in the entire background here. All right. Now, when I click on this particular icon, I already moved over to the Hsb Sliders, which stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. If you're coming from Lightroom, then this would stand for hue, saturation, and luminance, otherly known as the HSL panel. Now, if you don't see this, you're probably going to be on the little color wheel. And this does work. I mean, we can look at hue, saturation, and brightness in this color wheel here in a second. But if you come over to the second option, it should be the same on PC, but the second option gives you these little slider options. It's called the color sliders, right? Super original. Couldn't make this stuff up myself. Now, if you hit the drop down here, you may be on grayscale or RGB sliders. What you want to roll down to is Hsb sliders. This is how we're going to discuss hue, saturation, and brightness. Then what you're going to do is choose a color. Doesn't matter what the color is because you can change it post after you've already painted everything. So I just did that, painted the entire thing, and now you are up to speed. So what the heck is hue, saturation, and brightness? Well, hue is probably what we would associate as color, right? If I were to say, what color is that? You wouldn't say the hue is in the yellow range. What you would say is that's yellow, right? Or I guess in this case, we would consider this to be more of a green. But we can tell that it's on the verge of the threshold of green and yellow, right? We can tell that by looking at this slider. Green is over here, yellow's over there. We know that there's a little bit of green in here, but not a whole lot. It looks mostly yellow with like a green highlight. So that's what hue is, right? Hue is where in the spectrum of colors does this particular color sit, and it's at the 79 degree. I'm not going to get into what this is because I don't think it's as appropriate for just understanding creatively making color decisions. All right. Not today, at least. Then the next one is going to be saturation. This is how much of this color do I want in my image overall. So if I were to drag this to the left, then as you can see, I'm taking all of the color out of it. Like there's barely any color in here. There's only 9% of whatever the hue is that's actually showing up in my final product. Now, if I were to pull this all the way to the right, you can see I'm getting a whole lot of that color. All right. I'm getting a whole lot of that color that I selected in my hue or in the spectrum. That's probably the best way of talking about the hue. This is the spectrum and this is like an infinite circle wheel. And again, we'll talk about that in the color wheel here in a second. Then you have brightness. Now, this is how bright is the color overall. If I pull this over to the right, it's going to be really, really bright, as you can see. And if I pull this to the left, it's going to be pretty dark, right? Almost. And now it's just black, right? And we can tell that we need some sort of brightness because without any brightness in your color or in your color combination, so to speak, then you'll be at a completely black slider. And if we pull this all the way over to the right, then you can see the full spectrum of color here. But if you want it white, then you would just pull the saturation all the way down. And look, now your spectrum turns into this white hue And that's irregardless of brightness, right? With the exception of pulling it all the way to the black. Now, let's take a look at color one other place, all right? Or at least the hue, saturation, and brightness inside of the color wheel. Now, as you can see, any adjustments that I make over here are affected into the color wheel. So if I were to pull that into that green, and we'll even change this color into like blue. Look, it targeted that color specifically inside of the color wheel. And the way that the color wheel works is you have your hue and you have your saturation inside of this wheel, but your brightness is down here at the bottom. Now, this works really good if you can visualize a color, but you don't want to mess around with sliders, with the exception of the brightness slider, of course. Then you can pull this around and it's like, yeah, I think I want it like that color. And maybe that's where you want it, right? The color wheel works great for that because it allows you to choose anywhere on the spectrum. And as I said, this is like a infinite circle of color. Now, I'm not going to get into color theory in this particular series. If that's something you're interested in, let me know and I'll link to some videos where I think that they're explained really, really well. This is more about how do you creatively edit a photo with color, all right? But depending on where you want to be on the spectrum and then how much of that color you want, you can just move around your little picker here and you can choose whatever it is to your heart's content. You know, if I want it to be this really bright pink looking color, but maybe that's too bright. So then I can darken it by moving this slider down and you see how it impacts the entire color wheel. So that's essentially how the color fill, or, you know, just color in general, hue, saturation, and brightness works. All right. So there you have it in a nutshell, hue, saturation, and brightness, what it does, how it works. Now, throughout this series, we're going to take a look at how this can be used in a photo. But right now, I just wanted you to understand what we're doing, because when we get into the color adjustment layers and the color enhancers and the even the split tone, stuff like that, this is really going to help out. So if you found value in today's video, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new here, consider hitting subscribe. Stay tuned for the entire Creative Color series. And until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.